The first time I married, I thought I knew what forever looked like. I had been 23, young, full of romantic ideals, and convinced that love could conquer every storm. That marriage ended in divorce a few years later, and though the wounds eventually healed, the experience left me cautious. By the time I met Daniel, I wasn't chasing fairy tales anymore. I just wanted companionship, stability, and a sense of home. Daniel gave me that, or at least he did for a while. Daniel was older than me by nearly 10 years. He had already been married once before as well, and from that marriage he had a son, Ethan. When Daniel and I met, Ethan was already in his late teens, smart, independent, and more than a little skeptical about me. I didn't blame him. I wasn't trying to replace his mother. I just wanted to build a family in the space that was left for me. Over time, things between us softened. He started talking to me, sharing little details about his life, and eventually, I began to think of him as more than just my husband's son. He became part of my world. For the first few years, life with Daniel felt steady. We moved into a quiet home in the suburbs, blended our families as best as we could, and carved out routines that felt safe. I cooked dinners. Daniel worked long hours at his construction company. Ethan split his time between our house and his mom's place across town. We weren't perfect, but we were functional. At least, that's what I told myself. But as the years passed, the cracks began to show. Daniel became more distant, his patience shorter, his attention drifting elsewhere. Conversations that once lasted for hours were reduced to brief exchanges about bills, work, or errands. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, that every marriage had seasons like this, but deep down, I felt invisible. It was during one of those lonely stretches that I met Ryan. Ryan wasn't someone I sought out. He came into my life through work. I was managing a local bookstore, and he was a regular customer who seemed to have a knack for appearing on the days I felt most unseen. At first, it was harmless. He'd recommend a novel, ask about my opinion on a plot twist, or linger just long enough to make me laugh about something trivial. But harmless things have a way of growing roots if you let them. Soon, I found myself looking forward to his visits, waiting for those moments when someone actually noticed me. I never intended for it to become emotional infidelity, but that's what it was. Text messages started to follow the bookstore conversations. Compliments slipped into late-night chats. It wasn't physical, but it didn't need to be. The secrecy, the spark, the thrill of feeling wanted again. It was enough to blur every line I once thought was clear. One evening, when Daniel was away on a work trip, Ryan stopped by to drop off a book he thought I'd enjoy. I told myself it was innocent, but the truth was, I liked the way his presence filled the quiet of the house. We talked in the kitchen, the hours slipping by. It wasn't until much later that I realized how dangerous it had all become. The turning point came on a Saturday morning that began like any other. Daniel had gone out early to run errands, Ethan was home from college for the weekend, and I was getting ready for the day. I had just stepped into the bathroom, scrolling through my phone as I brushed my hair, when a message from Ryan popped up. It wasn't scandalous, but it was affectionate enough to give away the truth if anyone else saw it. I was about to delete it when the door swung open. Ethan stood there, frozen in the doorway. He hadn't meant to invade my privacy. He thought the bathroom was empty, but in that split second, his eyes darted to my phone screen. He saw the name. He saw the message. And though he didn't say a word, I could tell by his expression that he understood. The silence between us was crushing. I managed to stammer out something about locking doors and respecting boundaries, but the damage was done. Ethan didn't accuse me, didn't shout, didn't even ask questions. He just closed the door softly behind him and walked away. For the rest of the day, I could feel the weight of what had happened pressing down on me. Ethan knew, and if Ethan knew, it was only a matter of time before Daniel did. My hands shook every time my phone buzzed, terrified it would be Ryan again, and that Ethan would see more. I wanted to believe that maybe he would keep my secret, but the guilt gnawed at me until I couldn't stand it anymore. That night, after dinner, I found Ethan sitting in the living room, flipping through a magazine but clearly lost in thought. I sat down across from him, my heart racing. "Ethan," I began softly, "about earlier." He didn't look up. "I don't want to know." The way he said it, flat, heavy, final, broke me more than any confrontation could have. He wasn't angry, just disappointed. And in that disappointment, I saw a reflection of everything I had jeopardized. But secrets don't stay buried forever. 2 weeks later, Daniel confronted me. Whether Ethan told him directly or Daniel pieced it together on his own, I never found out. All I know is that one evening, as the sun sank behind the backyard fence, he walked into the kitchen with an unreadable expression and said, "Is there something you want to tell me?" The world seemed to tilt under my feet. I confessed not everything but enough. Enough for him to know there had been someone else in my thoughts, someone else I had leaned on when I should have turned to him. His face crumpled in a way I'll never forget. It wasn't rage. It was heartbreak. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. We went through counseling, shouting matches, long silences, and fragile truces. Daniel felt betrayed. Ethan kept his distance, and I was caught in the mess I had created. I had wanted to feel seen, but in the process, I had blinded myself to the people who mattered most. And yet, somehow, there was a strange kind of grace in the unraveling. Counseling forced Daniel and me to confront the years of neglect and loneliness we had both ignored. Ethan, though distant at first, eventually told me that seeing my mistakes had made him think more carefully about his own relationships, that honesty mattered more than temporary comfort. It took months, but slowly, we began to rebuild. Daniel and I aren't the same as we once were, but we're trying. The road ahead is uncertain, but for the first time in years, we're walking it together, without secrets, without shadows, without the silent hunger for something outside of us. When I think back to that morning in the bathroom, the moment Ethan accidentally walked in, I realize it was both the most terrifying and the most necessary turning point of my life. Because sometimes, the truth has to break you before it can set you free.